can make even more amazing change. When I left office, or maybe a few months before I left office, I had to make some decisions about what I would do after the end of my presidency. And I knew that I wanted to catch up on my sleep. I had to take Michelle on vacation. She deserved it, putting up with me for that long. But we also knew that our service wasn't yet done. I was one of the youngest presidents to be elected, which meant I was one of the youngest ex-presidents. And I asked myself, all right, what's the next thing that I can do to make the biggest impact, the most difference? And there were a whole range of issues that I care deeply about, many of which you work on. I believe climate change is an existential challenge for all of humanity. I believe that creating communities of tolerance and respect, despite our ethnic and religious differences, is vital if we are to thrive in this world that's now been shrunk by technology and travel and migration. I believe deeply in gender equality and making sure that women have the same opportunities that men do in all fields of life, and that people of different sexual orientations are treated with dignity and respect and human rights. I believe deeply in dealing with the growing inequality that has arisen as a consequence of globalization and technology. So there are a whole range of specific issues I was concerned about and that I intended to work on. But what I was also convinced of was that probably the biggest impact I could have would be to support and convene and engage and partner with the next generation of leaders. Because there's only one of me. And there's only one Michelle. And if we're going to solve all these problems and seize all these opportunities, then the most important thing we can do is to figure out how do we continually duplicate ourselves so that we have thousands of activists and leaders, and then tens of thousands, and then hundreds of thousands, and then millions of people who are working on behalf of the values and causes that we so deeply believe in. And so the theory of the Obama Foundation is actually fairly simple. If we can get young leaders like you to begin to work together, if we can provide you more tools, more resources, more attention, mentoring, maybe a little bit of inspiration. Above all, if we can get you to work in concert and teach and learn from each other, then you will change the world. And I can sit back and relax a little bit. And I know there's a whole lot of work to be done because we live in uncertain times. We're confronted by big questions about how to organize our communities and our countries in the international order. Here in Berlin, we have to recognize that this moment is full of contradictions because Europe in 2019, in some ways, has achieved the pinnacle of human well-being. I mean, collectively in Europe right now, on average, you probably see the highest standards of living of any group of people in the history of the planet. Wealthier, healthier, better educated. The continent has largely been at peace for 70 years. You have unprecedented information at your fingertips. You can travel freely across borders that once were closed. Our societies have made great strides to extend opportunity and educate our children and care for the sick and to pursue equality for people no matter what you look like or how you worship or who you love. So you would think that everybody'd feel pretty good right now. And yet, what we also know is that powerful forces are threatening to reverse many of these trends. The democratic institutions that help to bring these about oftentimes have been taken for granted. The planet that we live on is endangered. Some of the contradictions of our economies and how we produce and dispose of goods and services continually now doesn't appear to be as sustainable, particularly if, understandably, other parts of the world want to achieve the same kinds of standards of living as we have. We've seen in the 21st century the reemergence of profound religious and sectarian differences. You've got inequality that's been exacerbated first by the financial crisis, but as I said, some of the deeper trends of how capitalism works. You've got social media that was once considered to be the network that would provide us greater understanding, now suddenly appears to be a tool that is used to spread disinformation and hatred and suspicion. Nationalism, particularly from the far right, has reemerged, a politics that divides us into us and them. And we know where that leads. Europe knows better than anyone where that leads, to conflict and bloodshed and catastrophe. So, just as the world has choices to make, Europe has choices to make. The good news is that we actually know there are solutions. We know with changes in policy we can reduce inequality and we can combat climate change while still providing a high standard of living. We know that if we invest in our democracies, then they can work better than they're currently working. And that if we teach our children to love and listen instead of hate, that our societies can work better. But we can't do these things by sitting back and waiting for somebody else to do them. We're going to have to do them ourselves. And more specifically, you're going to have to do them. And what makes me optimistic is you're already doing extraordinary work. We've got young leaders here from across the continent who are working in government and civil society and the private sector to bring about positive change. You just heard, I believe, from Flavia and Delphine and Glenn, who I had originally met with when they were in Amsterdam. And I could not have been more impressed by the remarkable leadership that they were already showing. I met earlier today with a group of young people from the audience, including Jerome, he's here somewhere, who is using technology in France to mobilize humanitarian support after disasters around the world, and Elsa, who's working in Sweden to make this the first zero food waste generation, and Paul, who's working in Romania to map the distribution of political power so that government can be more transparent and ultimately more responsive to people. So I hope that so far you've already gotten a sense that you're not alone and that people like you are doing remarkable things, in some cases in the same area and sector that you're working in some cases in different sectors, but are motivated by the same values and the same vision. There are a lot more people like you out there who want to build rather than tear things down, and who want to bring people together rather than split them apart. But sometimes all of you are isolated and work alone, or feel as if you're working alone, and the whole then feels like it's less than the sum of its parts. Now, I'm not here to support any political party. I've held my last political office. The Obama Foundation is nonpartisan. Michelle would leave me if I ever ran for office again. But I'm deeply invested in these values of tolerance and equality and rule of law and democracy and human rights and human freedom and human dignity. And you've got a European parliamentary election that's coming up. It goes without saying that all of you need to vote if you are eligible, and your friends do too. Michelle and I talk sometimes, and when we hear that young people aren't voting or participating, we say to them, you would not let your grandfather or grandmother decide what clothes you wear or what music you listen to. So why would you let them decide the world you're going to live in and the politics that you're going to be subjected to? Why would you give away that power and that authority? So I'm assuming that all of you in one fashion or another are paying attention to political trends. But as we all know, casting a ballot is just the start. I always used to say that the most important office in a democracy is not president or prime minister or chancellor or governor or mayor, it's citizen. Change happens because citizens are mobilized and force change. And each of you, in your own ways, are part of that process. The question now is, if you are supporting each other and engaged with each other, and perhaps if we can help a little bit, can you start scaling up, doing more, building momentum, creating a new narrative, creating greater sense of possibility and a greater sense of hope? I think you can, and we've got a huge stake in your success. And hopefully the Obama Foundation will be able to help you in your work, because we're just getting started here, and we intend to work here not based on having all the answers, but rather having great confidence that if we're interacting with an amazing gathering like this, that we'll be able to come up with the solutions that we need, not just for Europe, but for the world. So with that, I'm going to start taking some questions. Thank you very much. All right. And